Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I want to talk about why actually getting a PhD or going to graduate school in general is actually important. You might not necessarily think it is, but I personally think it is. And I'm going to talk about that. So if you don't know who I am, I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There were so many people that helped me out in graduate school that I wanted to pay the favor forward and help out other people. So why is a PhD actually important, or graduate school in general? Why is it actually important? There are 3 different perspectives, I think, and you have to look at it sort of from a layered analysis, right? So it's called the level of analysis when you're looking at any particular perspective. That's what we're looking at is, one of them is thinking about the individual that's trying to get the PhD themselves. So it might be you that's watching this. It was me. I did my own PhD a few years ago. And, might also be the university that is an important player. And as well, it might be the state or the society that the university is in, right? So the country that the university is in. So I'm going to start off with the individual and sort of think about some of these particular factors and why it's actually important, and thinking about different motivations and stuff. So I've been learning about why people actually do sort of innovative things and thinking about their different motivations. I've been studying that for the last couple of years. And generally the ones that kind of make sense in terms of this particular dimension or this particular area of thinking about getting a PhD and doing a PhD. The first one, I think this is the most important, and I stress this a lot on this channel. It's just really for fun or the desire to learn. That's probably the biggest motivation. That's going to get you to the end for most people. And a lot of people actually just want to do it because they are motivated for personal motivations, a desire to learn something that they haven't learned before. That's an important thing. And that's a great motivation at the end of the day, and why it's actually a PhD is important, because you're actually satisfying that particular motivation. Another one, and this is important for depending on where you stand in society currently. And this one is trying to improve your socioeconomic status in society. So this is relating to your personal wealth, for example, or maybe it is relating to your sort of political standing, or maybe it's your standing amongst your friends and stuff like that. Just thinking about your social economic status. That's a really important thing in terms of improving where you are, and particularly if in terms of wealth, for example. So if you're coming from a country, or if you're coming from a background, I didn't, nobody else in my family had PhD, and nobody else went to university before I did. So it was really kind of a strange, interesting thing. Now lots more people in my family are doing that, and that's wonderful. But, at the time I was the first one. So it was a really strange thing. And a big motivation for me to actually go to university was to increase my socioeconomic status, right? So that is just to make a little bit more money, and hopefully have a better life, which is what a lot of people do. And, that's the sort of American or, Western ideal, or most people's ideal, right? They just want to make a better life for themselves. And that makes a lot of sense. And you can do that depending on where you stand. Now, you have to think about this, though. Some PhDs they're wildly different in terms of the economic benefit you get from a PhD. So if you do a PhD in business, engineering, law, medicine, whatever it is, those ones, you're probably going to get a return. It's still going to be very long in the future. So my return in terms of when I'm actually going to break even with this degree that I got is somewhere when I'm in my 50s. And, I did my own economic analysis a few years ago compared to just doing an undergraduate degree. So, the returns are long into the future. And that's fine, right? Like that's totally fine. But other ones, they just, often don't make a lot of sense. And so you have to be careful with that. You have to look to see what are the outcomes, what are the financial outcomes, benefits you're going to get from pursuing that particular degree or that particular PhD. And they do vary a lot. And so you should be looking at that if you're concerned at all about getting financial return on your education. And you should be. I mean, I think that is an important thing to think about. You're going to spend an awful lot of money on an education, and spend an awful lot of time on that particular education, you should be getting a return for that. Unless your desire and your willingness to have fun greatly outweighs the benefits that you get from social economic status, increases in social economic status. And the last thing, so the third thing I think that is important for a lot of people, there's all sorts of different factors, but these are the ones that I think are important. It's just the fact of actually getting a terminal degree. And there's something to be said about actually completing something and going to the end, that you get a lot of satisfaction from that particular thing. It's like climbing a mountain. I've used this analogy before on this channel, and it really is like climbing a mountain, right? So when once you finish maybe it's your master's or your undergraduate degree, you're kind of halfway done. And then you think, well, I just want to finish this mountain and I want to complete this mountain. And so you want to keep going and complete that thing. Now it leads you in a different direction, right? So that's an important thing with the difference between climbing a mountain and doing a PhD. It's often irreversible to actually come back after you do a PhD, but with climbing a mountain, you just come down. But when you do a PhD, it's irreversible because other people view you in a different way and you acquire knowledge that you can't do a brain dump and go back to where you were. It's just physically impossible, right? So that knowledge is in your mind and you can't go back to that stage. And that's an important thing to think about is you might not want to accumulate that knowledge in some areas. I don't know. That's an important thing to sort of consider whether you want to go down that route or not. So the second level, I guess, so we start off with sort of why individuals actually want to do and why it's important to do a PhD is because they're trying to satisfy some sort of need or desire. And, now we're talking about universities because it's important to universities. And this is thinking about universities as whole, infrastructure as a whole, and the university itself, right? And there's all sorts of universities that are unique and different. But generally, these are the factors why they want to actually have PhDs at their universities. The first one is they get more resources the more PhDs that they actually that they grant. And the reason is PhDs considered still pretty prestigious in the university academic world, right? In terms of the number of PhD granting institutions or number of PhDs that you're actually granting. And the more that you're granting and the more sort of knowledge that you're producing, the more that better students are actually going to be attracted to the thing that you are doing, right? Or the things that are going on in that university. So it attracts resources, it attracts financial resources. So not only sort of good students and better students want to go to that university because they're granting more PhDs, but you get more financial resources. So like grants, government grants, as well as maybe it's just revenue in general. And if you think about all the ones that are universities that are most prestigious, they're generally the ones that are granting PhDs, and the ones that are super prestigious that we all know and love, right? Princeton, Harvard, what else is there? Caltech, Berkeley, they're generally focused, in Canada, University of Toronto, University of Western Ontario, in the UK, maybe it is, I don't know, University College London, London School of Economics. There's all over the world, and I'm not sort of limiting into those particular universities, but basically thinking the ones that are really prestigious and we all know, they're the ones that are actually granting more PhDs, and they focus on that. In fact, the ones that, the ones I mentioned, the private schools in the United States, they generally are more graduate schools than undergraduate schools, right? So Stanford, for example, doesn't have a lot of undergraduate students, but they have a lot of graduate students, and they're the ones that we know. Because what ends up happening, and this is the second thing to think about, is that they are generating new ideas and new concepts. And so these new ideas, new concepts can be spun out of the university system and create new things that we know, right? And it's really the biggest reason behind why getting a PhD or having more PhDs is prestigious. It's not the PhD, it's not the paper itself. That's not the important thing. The important thing is the idea behind that paper, the things that they're generating, the ideas that people are generating. So the reason why Silicon Valley, a major reason why Silicon Valley, and there's a whole lot of economic, papers and stuff in the strategy and, economics literature that sort of talks about knowledge, or talks about regional clusters, like places like Boston or places like Silicon Valley. The reason why they're successful is because of these graduate students and the ones that are actually creating these wonderful ideas, or maybe it's a star scientist in one particular university. It's creating all these wonderful ideas and getting their students to go out and spin off and create new, maybe it's a business entity, maybe it's a patent or a new something, right? And that actually provides value and that attracts resources, so financial resources like venture capital funds, for example, to that particular area. And that's why it's so incredibly important to have people that are doing PhDs, but not only doing PhDs, but ones that matter. And they're working on ideas that matter. It's not just the paper itself that's kind of irrelevant, truly is irrelevant to what's going on. The most important thing is the idea that you're working on and whether it actually is an important idea. And, a PhD, that whole process is the time where you can create that new idea that a lot of people just don't have that opportunity, right? So one way to view it is you're just taking a sabbatical for 5, 6, 7 years of your life to go and sit there and think about an idea and get some feedback on this idea until it becomes really cool and interesting. A lot of people are in love with your idea, right? And that's really what it comes down to. At the end of the day, it's whittling down this idea to make it better so other people are paying attention to it. You're just having dedicated time to that particular idea. It has nothing to do with the paper. I'm serious. It has nothing to do with the paper itself. It has everything to do with the idea that you're generating. So the last thing is thinking about for the state or society that the university is in or the PhDs are in and why it's so incredibly important. A lot of economic production is strongly correlated with new ideas in generating new things. So research and development, for example, creates a tremendous amount of surplus in an economy. And where does this research and development come from? It comes from people that are creating new and interesting things. And we have a systematic process of creating these new and interesting things. And that's doing the PhD route, where you're actually creating something, or going into graduate school and creating something new and different. And that's the ultimate goal, is to do that. When you create these new and different ideas, it attracts resources. So you create something that's new and kind of unique. It'll attract resources. Maybe you create a spin-off of some sort, right? So you create a new company. That's the easiest sort of analogy with this new idea. And it attracts some resources people are interested in. They're like, wow, this is kind of an interesting new battery. Attract some resources. You go and actually produce something from it, and then you test market it, right? So maybe you sell it to 1,000 different people. Turns out that battery actually does produce, electricity, and it does it better than everybody else. And then you can start selling it and selling many more of those and generating more economic prosperity based on that battery, right? So maybe you sell it to Apple, this new battery design, and then you start selling hundreds of thousands of them, and it saves Apple money, it saves the consumers money and resources, and it makes you money to do that. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do, and that's why it's so important to generate these new ideas during a PhD, and why PhDs are actually really important. So it creates a lot of economic prosperity for a country, and so you can increase the economic prosperity for the country. There's also something that also happens when you, in terms of a country, that I think is really important, and it's related to human capital, or just the fact that the people that are in the country are better educated. A PhD is something to strive towards, so other people might be attracted to that, and so it might be a pull towards, if there's more PhDs in a country, then people are going to be pulled towards that and want to do that, and it's going to motivate people to actually get an education. It really does in a lot of countries. That's a real motivation. If you see other people that have, maybe it's a different different status in a country. And so sometimes it's a bad thing to have this sort of disparity in a country, but sometimes it's a good thing particularly if it's related to merit or meritocracy, because then other people see and strive to get there. There's all sorts of psychological effects that happen to want to get there, but at the end of the day, if you're striving to get there, and we can see that there is this pattern and sort of a route to get to that thing, then people are going to be motivated to push themselves and get a little bit better. And then once you generate these ideas, or people that are generating ideas, they have all these things that are called knowledge spillovers. And so they create something that's new. It's interesting. Somebody else picks up on it in a completely different area. So you create this new battery design. And then somebody in aviation say, oh, look at this battery design. That's really cool. We can implement that in aviation. And so you start doing that. And then somebody else picks up, the stuff that you've done in aviation. They bring it into the petroleum industry. And so you have all these spillover effects of knowledge in generating new things, where you can grow the economy, and you can grow the country even more by having more people that are highly educated in a particular country, because they're generating these new ideas, right? So it's really has a lot of benefit at the society level. Now, I'm not talking about any of the risks or costs or anything like that. There definitely is massive risks and massive costs of doing a PhD. You can watch some of my other videos where I actually talk about some of these things. I'm open about it. But generally, there is a lot of benefit in the macro sense, or in the sort of aggregate sense. A PhD makes a lot of sense in a society. It does have a lot of benefit, and it can do a lot of positive things, and it is important as a whole to not only to society but to universities. It makes a lot of sense, and then for the individuals themselves, so they're motivating or satiating their desires to do something. That's a positive thing, right? That's allowing that particular person to actually achieve something that they wanted to do, but they couldn't have done without that sort of system at play in the university system to get you to do that particular thing. So if you like this answer, give me a thumbs up. I do appreciate it. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel and try to be as helpful as I possibly can, and try to, just be a decent human being. All right. Take care. Have a nice day. Bye.